Hello, and welcome to Doobies, the dog. A nice fatty here. Some 33%, I think it was, Gorilla Glue. And I think for reference here, here's a standard size pen. So, think it big tonight. Beautiful day on the coast today. Sorry y'all missed it. Rain this morning. Throughout the night last night, sprinkled off and on, and then rain this morning, and then oh boy. Sun broke through about 10:30, 11 o'clock. It was pretty decent after that. A couple of conversations I've had lately have gotten me thinking about something. I know a whole lot of people that are considering themselves ill. They think they have a mental disorder or an anxiety disorder or a depression, chemical depression, or something along those lines. And for the most part, it's simply not true. You're just not good at tuning out reality. To live in today's world and not be angry, and not be terrified, and not be depressed, and not have a shit ton of anxiety would mean you have a mental illness. Anybody who's not freaked out about the way the world is operating is sick in the head. It's important to remember before you diagnose yourself with depression that you're not just surrounded by assholes and idiots, which is the case. Until and unless every human being on the planet is treated equally, there are two kinds of people in the world: the oppressors and the oppressed. So, maybe your anxiety is coming from being an active participant in a tyrannical oppressive system. Maybe your depression is a direct result of the generational repeating of the same stupid mistakes over and over and over again. Just a thought. Krishnamurti said being well adjusted to a profoundly sick society is not indicative of mental health. The leader of the free world gets on his knees and lets a pedophile put biscuits and high C in his mouth, fully believing that because the pedophile prayed over it, it is now the literal body of his Savior Jesus Christ. The guy that you're trusting to lead us participates in ritualistic cannibalism of a mythical Jewish zombie. How could you have anything but anxiety knowing this is the case? You get all these oligarchs, Bezos and Koch brothers and McConnell and Boeing and Dow and DeVos, and they're all fucking mad. Just the fact that we have this many billionaires and not a single Batman should tell you something. These people get fucking nation as rich as nations. Could solve world hunger, could end malaria in Africa, could provide clean water to every village in Central America that doesn't have it, could. And what do? Build rocket ships to Mars. Go fly around and be fucking weightless for 2 minutes. The Clinton Foundation is worth tens of trillions of dollars a year. Almost everything that they back is retarded and toxic. They're pro-GMO. They think glyphosate is the answer to fucking starvation. Newsflash, we have enough food to feed everybody. We just have a system that relies on scarcity to be profitable. So they throw food away to keep it scarce, to keep it profitable. Post-traumatic stress disorder. I've been diagnosed with it twice now. There's two words in that I resoundingly disagree with in that diagnosis. A, it is not post-traumatic stress disorder. It is ongoing, still happening, still taking place stress. And number two, my stress is a direct response to stimulus. And it is the appropriate response. Therefore, it's not a disorder. I have traumatic stress because there's things happening in the world that I find traumatizing. ADHD, attention deficit disorder. This is a disease that was invented basically in my childhood, during the time I was a kid. There's no such thing. There's people that can shut down their will long enough to sit in a stupid fucking chair for 8 hours and have people regurgitate shit. A doesn't mean anything to them, B doesn't mean anything to you, and C isn't going to help you in the world whatsoever. That's what ADHD is. It's people that you can't slam a cookie cutter down and get them to pass a specific set of tests to please the governmental program they created that says this is what education is supposed to look like. So the Republicans say fuck you, the Democrats say here's a program that's going to fuck you. In a room full of shit throwing monkeys, the man with a sponge looks like a lunatic. In a country full of people actively burning down the planet and pointing their finger at everybody but themselves, admitting that I'm the oppressor makes me sound like a lunatic. That which you do, that which you allow, you abide. You endorse. You condone. And the things that you do are on your plate and your plate alone. And I watch otherwise happy, intelligent, fairly suspicious people get sucked into this whole thing where at some point the news became funny and edgy. You started getting your Dave Stewarts and your Trevor Noahs and your news shows that weren't obviously bullshit. But I watched a whole generation of people that didn't believe the man and didn't believe the media get sucked back into it, just like Rolling Stone, like that had anything to do with music. In 1980s, I visited a mine with a friend of mine who was interested in mining. She took me to a mine. Way underground. I did not like it. But that's where I learned about pneumatic vehicles. Because fuel and electricity and anything that sparks is out of the question underground in a mine. So they use pneumatics, and they have for 100 plus years. Now, a pneumatic motor consists of very few pieces. There's a housing, there's a cam, there's a shaft, there's a bearing or two, and then there's a crank that you hook to things. There's the attachments that you attach the housing to whatever it is you're trying to power. Okay? In a combustion engine, there's I can't tell you how many thousands of parts just in the engine. Thousands of parts. Springs and little balls and bearings and fucking gears and push rods and valve springs and valve seats and tappets, and there's just thousands of pieces. And each one of them pieces takes a factory to make it. In a pneumatic vehicle, you don't need a transmission, so there's tens of thousands of pieces you just eliminated from the cost of manufacturing these vehicles. And the design is so simple that one guy with $500,000 can build a factory to build these motors and build them right. Instead of having to have a conglomerate with billions of dollars to build multiple factories and convert multiple other factories over to build a new type of combustion engine. Okay? And pneumatics can be made almost entirely from the metal that we have here that can be recycled into it without any more mining. Because electric cars are not green. They're not sustainable. The metals, the lithium and the rare earth metals and all the other things that go into making those batteries and making those motors take extensive strip mining. Extensive. And there's a better, easier, kinder, cleaner alternative. Okay? If you're charging an air tank, you can use a windmill, you can use water pressure, you can use hydro, and if you choose to burn something, which I wish you wouldn't, but if you have to, you can build a stack to collect enough of the gases that you're not destroying the environment in the process of creating the air pressure. I mean, you could literally just anchor screws in a river. Creating energy is so fucking easy. Anybody that's ever had to do battle with nature knows that nature is just full of fucking energy. And you don't need to set shit on fire and fucking dig up mountains to do it, to make it. If they put 25% of the budget that goes into looking for more oil into research and development of building a house that can be built in any one of the 50 states that provides all of its own energy, that has built-in technology that harnesses the energy around it. They could do it easily. It's just the overall process. Pneumatic cars don't wear out. The only thing that wears out is the things that touch the ground or the things that you touch. There's nothing in the motor to wear out. There's pneumatic motors in mines in China that have been there for fucking 90 years. Same motor. Going up and down and up and down and up and down a mine, hauling tons and tons and tons and tons of ore. They don't wear out because there's no parts that rub against each other. There's no fire, there's no heat. And for transportation, pneumatics are the way to go. And producing electricity is not that hard. Yeah, I mean, you stop and think about it. If you take a rod that's 35 feet tall and you put a 50-pound weight on it that's shaped like a bullet, stick it straight up out of the ground, that rod is going to go like this ever so slightly. Put that rod in a ratchet so that it's turning a worm gear and you're producing torque, and torque equals energy equals, and there's 10,000 simple things like that that can be done to produce electricity to do things with. And then changing the way that we do things so that we don't need electricity for everything. Your average American shits enough to create enough methane to cool their food and cool their house and probably cook their food. Between shit and compost, vegetable scraps and what have you, But all that technology has existed. Methane digesters have existed for a long time. Pneumatic motors have existed for a long time. You know, windmills have been around forever. And I mean, like a place where I live right here on the coast, it's windy every day. I mean, even when it's calm, if you go up on the hill on the mountain, there's a breeze. You go 20 feet up from the ground, there's always a breeze. Now, I know people right here who have little windmills on their sailboats, and they run their television, their Xbox, their refrigerators are propane, but they run all their lights, they got their laptop plugged in, and they're not sweating electricity. And they just got one, and they're just sitting at ground level. So if you had 4 of them on poles over your house here, you'd be able to sell electricity back to the grid. But in order for us to get off of coal and nukes and all that shit, the grid has to die. It has to go away. We have to go gridless. The grid's stupid. It's obsolete. We never really needed it. If we'd listened to Tesla instead of fucking numbnuts, we wouldn't have used it. I knew a dude in Florida owned an exercise gym. He told me one day that he had a $3,000 a month electric bill. Come on, you got 250, 300 people in there running on them fucking hamster wheels, and you don't have one of them hooked to anything? What? You're paying for electricity so people can come in and burn calories in your place on hamster wheels and shit. That fucking 6th grader could figure out how to do that. Voltage regulator and an alternator from any junk car on a fucking treadmill will work, or a stationary bike to charge batteries with. For fuck's sake. So yeah, all this technology and information, it's existed for a long time. I've known about it for quite a while, and I've gotten to the point where I'm tired of talking about it. People think I'm insane because I talk about houses made out of straw bales. Because I've never seen one. They picture some Three Little Pigs bullshit. I don't know what they picture. If you build your house out of straw bales and cob, you can shape it like anything you want. You could. It's like building a house out of Play-Doh, for fuck's sake. It's awesome. And it's energy efficient beyond anything, any fucking manufactured materials you'll ever get. And it's not going anywhere. It's not going to rot. It's not going to fucking fall apart. It's not going to. Tornado comes, you turn up the fucking stereo so you can hear it. So, if you build the right kind of house in the first place, then it doesn't take you 30% of your yearly budget to heat it. We built a little cob cabin in this property in Kentucky. And for these, I was staying at this kind of a commune, sort of a fledgling wanting to be commune. And they were just trying to build enough shit to be able to join the Eco Village network and get, hooked up with that group. So I helped them build this little cob cabin because I've been to like 3 or 4 cob workshops. And we did the cob and the wine bottles, double-ended wine bottles for light. We did a thermal mass in it. In fact, the way we did it, the entire south wall of the house was like 6 foot thick. It had a big wedge coming out, and that was all painted black to gather sunlight. Or not the south wall, the north wall. The south wall was all glass, all windows. And we just made a dome roof with them fucking wine bottles that lets the light into them. So you got all these different colored dots all over in the ceiling. It's just beautiful. We put a big skylight in the top. Probably cost us $1,100 worth of materials that we bartered for. And we had like 20 people and probably 400 man hours altogether into building it. You know, and it was just a cabin. It didn't have a toilet in it. It had an outdoor shower attached to the back of it that heated up on the solar shower. It was all made out of cob too, that you could easily, probably just with a heavy blanket and a little tiny wood stove, also turn into a sauna. But that house is going to be there 100 years from now. Barring a massive landslide or a fucking volcano or atomic bomb, that house ain't going nowhere. If a fucking forest fire came along, burned down every tree there, it would just fucking bake that house to a hardened shell like a clay pot. That'd be it. That'd be all it happened. So we're still chopping down forests and building houses out of sticks and plastic. I just talked to a retired fireman the other day. He was a fireman in where was he a fireman? Colorado, I think Boulder area, and before that Michigan, Detroit area. But he started being he went into firefighting in the '60s, so he's watched aluminum siding turn into vinyl siding. He's watched Tyvek come along instead of tar paper. He's all these different things that have changed in the industry. He's seen what happens to them when they're on fire, and he said a lot of guys end up quitting and leaving firefighting because of that shit. Because they get in some of these newer houses when they're on fire, and it's Armageddon. It's a whole new thing. See, there's this funny fucking thing about the harder something is to set on fire, the harder it is to put out once it's on fire. So having a house that you have to turn into lava to set it on fire is a pretty good fucking deal. Instead of plastic and pine. What the fuck, man? I know a house in Florida. It's the 5th house on the same property, and every time it's been knocked on by a hurricane 5 times. Stop building houses out of sticks, you morons. You could build a better structurally sound house out of just bamboo than you can with sticks. Oh, and by the way, bamboo is really earthquake proof. Jeez, oh, Yeah, so they're trying to sell all this shit for green technology that's not. There's nothing green about lithium polymer batteries. No matter where you are in this country, there's an easy, cheap way to make electricity. You're here on the coast, the ocean's right fucking there. If you want energy, man, I bet you got energy. I'm pretty sure I could make a rig that I could go set out at low tide and let it run for one tide and charge enough lead acid batteries, like deep cycle batteries, to run my house for a couple days. Probably more. You could, yeah. There's a fucking massive amount of energy in the ocean. Just a little tiny piece of the ocean has a massive amount of energy. In the plains, you got winds, man. All fucking day, you got winds. And you got heat. You got sunlight. You don't need to make solar panels to use sunlight for energy. Thermal convection works really well in a bunch of ways. So do magnifying glasses and steam. So there's a whole bunch of other ideas. You can use heat to create pressure. Cold air, hot air creates pressure on the cold air because the hot air wants to be elevated over the cold air. So you have pressure underground, you have heat. If you have cold air beneath the ground and you have hot air above the ground, you have pressure. And if you use pneumatics to move things, you have pressure, you have energy, you can move things. So pneumatics, magnetics, which is what wind power is just spinning magnets in copper. Magnetics, using magnetics to move things, doing what Nikola Tesla was trying to get us to do back then, and spending a lot more attention on mapping and understanding the energetic patterns and nature of the planet itself so we can utilize that to move things around. Think hoverboards. Magnets that mirror the magnetic polarity of the planet. Smart magnets. So there's really simple solutions to almost all of this. You know, and there's well, what do you do when it's not windy? Well, I don't know. I mean, you live where there's hills? Well, yeah, I live in the mountains. Well, when it's really windy and you're making more electricity than you need, you move water up a hill. And then when it's not windy, you let that water come back down the hill. You'd be amazed how much, like a 20,000 gallon set of cisterns, pilas, how much electricity they can produce if you have just a 20-foot drop on your property in elevation. So, again, fuck their narratives. What is all over my hand? Oh, playing with the ink pen. Well, I think I'm gonna leave you with that. This has been Doobies with Doug. Wait a minute. I only ever smoke one doobie. Maybe I should either call it Doobie with Doug or start smoking two doobies. I think I'm gonna start smoking two doobies.